These natives here don't murder you. You got the Wasatch Mountain Range. Grizzlies, wolves, riled up Mormons.
We are the chosen!
Peter Berg, sir, welcome to the Awards Tour podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really have to talk about American Primeval because you've been a part of some incredible pieces of cinema and television and a lot of great things throughout your career. But I really feel this show really hit the zeitgeist. Like, I lost count of how many weeks it was at the top of the Netflix 100. Can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to go on this journey and sort of really go into an area of cinema that you haven't really, I think, gone this deep into yet?
I mean, the idea of a period piece is something that was appealing to me, and that's something that I have really never done before. And Mark L. Smith, the writer, is someone who had done work in this space. He wrote The Revenant, and he and I were friends, and we're both big fans of a movie called Jeremiah Johnson that Robert Redford did a long time ago, and really liked the idea of trying to make a show about survival, about just how hard it is to survive, particularly back in 1857, when you could get killed 5 different ways just walking in the woods to go to the bathroom. And that was something that, for a variety of reasons, was appealing to both of us. I generally am attracted to the idea of trauma as an experience in much of the stuff that I do, probably because I experienced trauma as a young kid and have a lot of kind of trauma centers in my brain that I've always kind of gone back to when I'm working. So things like Lone Survivor or Patriots Day or Deepwater. My very first film, Very Bad Things, was fairly traumatic. And what I'm drawn to is the idea of traumatizing characters and experiencing and presenting trauma to a viewer, and then trying to help them get out of it at the end, and explore themes like love and courage over fear, and kind of the collective power that comes from people working together and forgiving and those kinds of themes. And I thought, with what 1857 and that particular time provided in terms of trauma, if we could find the love and the compassion to balance it out, that's kind of in my personal sweet spot. So that's how it happened.
Well, I definitely think you definitely highlighted love and compassion and I think the lengths that people will go to protect their family and their loved ones and those of their community. But I'm not going to lie to you. It's a rough go of it. I watched it all like in like a 6-hour block, and it is hard to fathom what these people went through in the PTSD. And I heard you say that this was the hardest thing you ever shot. Can you give me an example of like the level of difficulty that this show sort of demanded, and which one was the most intimidating?
I mean, every day, I think we shot for 130 days, which is a long time. And all of our locations were very remote. They were Native American reservations. We were based in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but we'd have to get up extra early to drive about an hour minimum outside of Santa Fe to these very remote locations. And we shot all through the winter and all through the summer. So, in the winter at elevation, it was really cold, in the teens, barely in the 20s, lots of snow, lots of wind, rough locations every day. And in the summer, it was just the opposite, like scorching heat, which we had to kind of make look cold. And that was challenging. This would be 90 degrees and we'd be putting these actors, in these bearskin, bear fur clothing, and just having them try and act really cold. And we had windstorms, snowstorms, ice storms, sandstorms, dust storms. There were a lot of rattlesnakes that were all around our sets. So we had to have folks going around with these long tongs to get the rattlesnakes out of the rocks. Horses acting up, a lot of fighting and stunts, broken bones, blood. So I like to say about American Primeval, there's a lot of blood, a lot of sweat, and no tears. Everybody loved it.
Yeah. Wow.
We had crew members that lost 25, 30 pounds and got in great shape. And people, making movies is not always the most certainly glamorous. For anyone that thinks it's glamorous, it's not. But it's a lot of time for people away from their families, in sound stages over and over again, these dark stages, sound stages, and people tend to go a little nuts. And on American Primeval, it's just the opposite. Everybody really, my crew is so, so good. Everyone, hundreds of crew members and cast members who loved the challenges of, not being in sound stages and not being able to, we never had reception, so there wasn't a lot of time spent scrolling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Just a very hardy crew, a lot of grit for all of us.
Yeah, I will say the cast that you were able to assemble from this, and just starting with Taylor, who you've had a long working relationship with, and this is obviously not the first, second, or even third time I think you've directed him, but then also adding someone like Betty and Dane, and everyone that you assembled for this is crazy. How did you do that, I would say? And I also would ask, it seems like a lot of them you sort of mined previous collaborators. You brought a lot of folks that you'd worked with before back into this.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of big on trust, and making movies like this it's not easy, as everyone watching who's ever gotten involved in a film knows. You're up in a high pressure situation where you're spending a lot of money and time is not your friend, and you have to just kind of go, and there's not a lot of time for relationship building when you're working on a film. So if you get into a situation where are not getting along with someone, or you're not, getting what you want, it's almost too late. So I value relationships like Taylor Kitsch, who I know so well, and I knew he was really right for this part, and he is kind of that character. He's a bit of a recluse, and he lives up in Montana and is not a big fan of, big city life and all that kind of stuff. And I knew that this was the right role for him, but just having him up there and knowing I can, be in the middle of a bunch of crazy stuff and lock eyes with a friend, is very comforting and gives me a certain confidence and strength to deal with other things. So I love having Taylor there kind of as an anchor, someone I really know well. And then bringing people like Kim Coates, Shea Wiggum, Betty Gilpin, Dane DeHaan, just really cool, great actors who I'd never worked with. And fortunately, there were no problems. I have a lot of love and respect for all of those actors and pretty much everyone in the show. And if I didn't have respect for someone, I probably wouldn't say their name to you right now. But I did have respect. And really, I mean, you can see in the work, there's not a weak link in that cast. And everybody was great. And I love them. And it's a tremendous respect. Having Kitsch there as someone that's like my brother is very comforting and gives me extra firepower to do my job.
Yeah, and I will say one of the things I want to highlight for folks, and I don't want to spoil it because it is a show that I feel, listen, it's based on true events. These are you guys definitely stooped it in a lot of realism, but a lot of this show is going to be surprising when folks watch it, and I want them to feel the surprises that I felt when I binged it. But that sequence in the first episode, the oneer that I assume is a oneer, or like, I don't know how you shot that, but it is up there with like Saving Private Ryan. It is up there with like one of the like, it is to me because it's such chaos.
Keep going.
So I would love for you listen. I would love for you to break down, first of all, where'd you get the TARS? Where'd you get the, audacity to say this is how we're going to film this? And then two, how did you execute it? Because that is not, when you commit to that's a heavy a shoot right there.
Right. Well, and what I've said, someone else has mentioned that, and I say, with full respect to the great show that is Adolescence, and I think it's an extraordinary show. We were doing oneers before they were doing oneers. Okay.
Facts.
And so just remember that when you're watching all these great shows. And I really did love Adolescence, and
Agreed. No, they've had a
My
really
hat
great
for
run. Yeah.
filmmaking. I was trying to, as we were getting ready to start, pre-visualizing that scene and figuring out how we're going to do a big massacre. I knew that I wanted it to be through the perspective of this mother and this child, and to try as hard as I could to let the audience participate in that trauma, because obviously something like that is beyond traumatic. And that goes back to what I was, started with, is that it's sort of trauma filmmaking where the goal is to really, really injure characters psychically, and to be somewhat emotionally brutal and physically brutal, and then watch them fight back to reclaim their spirit and their confidence and their power. Those are the kinds of crazy ideas that are sort of going around in my head, but I wanted to try and let the audience experience that trauma. So I wanted to stay with Sarah and Devin, Betty Gilpin and Preston, the actors, and try and get the audience as close as they could be, kind of real time, inch for inch. So we end up having the audience have a visceral reaction to it, which is kind of what I think you're describing that you had. And a oneer is just a great way to do that. It's hard, but it's also kind of fun and very invigorating for the crew because everybody's involved and everyone kind of knows that, we're doing those oneers and it's a series of shots that we stitch together, but it has to be very carefully planned. We're doing it all with the sun low. So it's got, a big dynamic sun flare in the middle of it, which means you got to prep it for hours and then you only have like 42 minutes to shoot each chunk during the day. And then you've got like 8 different sections that you stitch together. Everyone knows, like, if one person screws up, the whole thing's kind of in jeopardy. So everybody got really fired up. And it's almost like doing a live show or like theater. And everybody, goes home at the end of those days with psyched up and not wanting to go to sleep and a lot of adrenaline, and really proud of everyone, particularly Brett Hurd, our operator, who was diving under wagons and avoiding galloping horses and a bull with this camera. As a filmmaker, you're really depending heavy on your crew, and our operator, Brett, was extraordinary, as was everybody else.
I love it. And to your point, the proof is in the work because it is like I did have that emotion with it. Because again, I just queued this up, be like, oh, I'm gonna talk to Peter Berg about his new show. I'd like seen it, but I'm an awards editor. So like when this came out, it was the middle of Oscar season. I was like, oh, I'll catch it. And so then when I'm catching up on it, I'm like, this is intense. This
Yeah.
is a lot. And it just wouldn't be something that I would expect from someone of your filmography. As I spoke to you before we got in here. So I went to school and also lived in Austin during the whole Friday Night Lights whole experience. Like I remember when girls were like trying to go find Taylor and Kit at Barton Creek Mall and stuff. Like they were really like hunting for these kids back when they would film up at Pflugerville. Like
Yes.
this is deep, kids, right?
Yeah. Pflugerville. Pflugerville is the greatest name for a school in a town. Pflugerville. When I heard about Pflugerville, I'm like, we got to use Pflugerville. I love it.
It's pretty great. I just have to ask you, looking back on it too, because I guess they're talking more, but like it's crazy to me to think that this book, which then became a movie, which then became a TV show, that still the thing that people talk to you the most about? You've done so many things, but I just have a feeling that's got to be the one that like everybody talks about.
That's certainly up there. And for anyone that ever asked me about Friday Night Lights, anyone that particularly anyone in our business, that wants to try and make something, and they're like, "Oh, I really like Friday Night Lights." Like, how did that happen? What's the kind of secret behind something connecting on that kind of level? And it just goes back to telling the truth. And Buzz Bissinger, who wrote the book Friday Night Lights, went and lived in Odessa, Texas for a year and really got deeply, deeply enmeshed and kind of connected to that culture. And for anyone who's been down there, it's, a culture so much more expansive than football. Is how people live their lives and how families are organized and churches are organized and schools are. And there's good and there's bad and there's beautiful and there's ugly and there's hypocrisy and there's virtue all swirling around every second of it. And Buzz wrote that book. And when I was getting ready to write the movie, he said to me, you have to go down there and live it. That's when I first found out about Pflugerville, because I lived with Austin Westlake High School for football season and traveled with them and went to high school again and learned, viscerally what that means, what that culture is feeling. And that's not unique to Texas. It can be reproduced all over the country through sports and family, and how it's such a part of the fabric of us. And then that morphed into the TV show. And if we do another one, it will only be because we feel like we've reloaded emotionally in 2025, because it's a different world today. And we're looking at how we could do that in a completely new way, but that preserves that kind of truthfulness, which is why I think the show worked.
Listen, and that's the other thing I will say, and I think you already know this, people that live down there, like if it didn't smell right, they'd tell you. And I've never heard that from anybody. Everyone is like, this is almost too close to real life.
That was why we went to Texas to film it, because we knew that, like, I'm surprised you never came as like an actor or background or something.
I wasn't going to tell you that, but yes,
Were you?
Of course I did. Everybody did. Yes,
were you in the show?
Like day. I did a day when they filmed. This was like, y'all had already had Smash like out of school at that point. Like this was later. This was later in the time. But yeah, I did an audience. I did a crowd work scene.
That's so awesome, and we were surrounded by you guys, and like, it's not that you would ever say, oh, this sucks, or what are you doing, or this doesn't feel right, or this is fraudulent, but you could just feel the energy coming from the community of Austin in particular, where people were like, yes, I want to sit around for 12 hours in a football stadium and I'm going to do it with a smile, with clear eyes and a full heart, because it felt very real. And having that community there to reinforce what we kind of knew and help us make it better. Again, it just made us able to keep it real. I guess it really comes down to that. Keep it real.
And you did. I wanted to ask you about this because I think it's also funny that folks that maybe know you from Friday Night Lights or later on don't know that you were a very like steady working actor for a long time before you became a director. And I think it still speaks to how you operated as a director. Is there something now, even though you're still catching roles, I saw you in the studio, that you look back on your time as an actor as the most informative to now your time as a director and a producer? Like, what was the thing that you learned during that time that you've kept through all of these other projects, like a Bible?
For me, there were certain directors who encouraged improvisation. And it were always sort of like, okay, well, this is the way it's written, and we'll respect that. But what if we just take a little time and play around and see if we can't get lucky, if we can't find some sort of glorious accident, some kind of weird magic, and just allow and I don't mean to sound like corny or foolish, but let those kind of divine muses of creativity see if they can strike. And as an actor, my favorite things were just playing around, just trying different things and laughing and, always respecting the writers, but sometimes just seeing if magic could hit. And that's something that I really encourage with all my actors, and why I love Taylor Kitsch so much, because he loves to improv, and Betty Gilpin loved to improv, and so much of the show we always shot Mark L. Smith's words, but sometimes if you stay open to accidents and not come in so kind of locked in on a plan, then some really good things can happen. So I learned that from acting.
I love that. I would be turning in my Fenty card if I didn't ask you about the documentary that I know you can't say nothing, but like, first of all, you are the envy of like every documentary, music, video, filmmaker, every Black woman in existence, and most of the makeup users of the world. You have hundreds of thousands of hours of Rihanna unfiltered somewhere that you are editing into a documentary. I've seen the Deadline article. I know this is existence. Just tell me what you can. Just tell me what you can.
Well, I
Rihanna.
mean, the one thing I think is just like I'm thinking about as we're talking. I mean, you've seen American Primeval, right? You've seen some of my work. You know, if you think about that extremely talented individual who we're talking about, and you think about who she is and what she stands for, and you know what she looks like, and the fact that she could have asked anyone to make a doc on her, she chose this handsome fella. It makes no sense.
No, it does, because you treated her so well on Battleship.
Yeah, and
that she said, listen, Battleship Hive signed up. I stand that movie in a way that is inappropriate. And I just love that she was like, yeah, this one. Me and him were cool back then, and we're still cool
we
now.
were, and I kind of think it's part of her genius, to not rush a doc, because you could, you know how disposable and how quickly this stuff gets consumed and then regurgitated or, you know, forgotten. One of the things that we talked about when we started was, let's just see, like, this could be the portrait of a life. And as it goes on, and I mean, she was a very different young lady when we started filming this. And, you know, there were no children, and it was a different human being, and her evolution as a human is extraordinary in my mind. And so, yes, we're working on it, and it will come out. And when it does, I think it's going to be something that lasts, that is not just easily consumable like so many docs are today about famous people.
Oh, I love that so much. I'm anxiously awaiting. Take your time. I'm not
Never going to
pressuring her for
stop
the
loving her.
album. I'm
You're
not going to
never,
pressure you for the doc.
you know what I mean? Like, it's there's no ticking clock. That's the kind of beautiful thing about it. No one is ever going to stop loving and respecting Rihanna.
No, I dig that. Well, we're going to get out of here, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, the way you left American Primeval, I would assume there's places that you can continue in the story if you and the team, although I will say, I think actors with this show might have like Game of Thrones level job security, not to spoil too much, but it's
Everybody's dead.
road.
That's the challenge. They're all dead.
Shush. Folks that maybe don't know, but
Not all of them. Not all of them.
But what are your thoughts? I heard you said maybe a prequel if you do
So,
it.
so we're trying to think. Actually, just we had a meeting on it today. We're all up for it. It's, to me, just like, what's the point of doing it if you can't really do it, and figure out a way to don't do it just because it's too much work. So we're trying to figure out a way of completely reinventing it, not unlike Friday Night Lights. What's a reinvention where you preserve what works and kind of what's in the soul of it, but do it in a completely new and I don't know, fresh way. So that's what we're trying to figure out now.
We will be anxiously waiting for it, sir. Again, congratulations on it. And yeah, we'll see you on the next thing.
Appreciate it.